time for our regular finance expert, Gavin Martin, to join us and help us understand some of those issues relating to finance. Gavin, great to have your company, as always, on 2020.
G'day, Matt. Great to be with you.
Now, Gavin, one of the things we've been looking at over the last couple of weeks in the news is this whole situation in the USA. It is a very confusing and complicated system that the USA has got, where the politicians start squabbling over different things, and that affects the entire country. So, well, today we could have a look at this and see if you could help us understand what's going on. So, first things first, what is going on? What is this talk with debt ceiling and politicians squabbling, and how come that's affecting people and, I guess, places as well?
Yeah, there are several issues that have all come to play all at once that's almost created the perfect storm and made the US, I guess, the focal point of the world at the moment, and we're all looking, I guess, at them saying, what is going on here? And it's just the intricacies of the US system that started with the simple process that normally happens, that there's this continuing resolution that's passed by the US Congress to allow them to keep spending, and that was supposed to happen on the 30th of September. But what happened was the right faction of the Republican Party, often called or referred to as the Tea Party, they disagreed with an Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. So this whole change in the way that their medical system works and the insurance system works. They seem to be moving more so to the it's very different, but more towards the Australian model of Medicare and insurance that we try to have everybody participate in. So they're creating a similar sort of system over there. Currently, it's all focused on employers paying for medical insurance, whereas they're moving it to be anybody that can afford it needs to have it, and that's the whole Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. Now, the right faction of the Republican Party, the Tea Party, disagree with that. They're very much a small government focus, so they use this mechanism of not approving ongoing spending as a way to try and stop this legislation passing. And so that was the trigger for not passing or not allowing the spending to continue, and that meant that the government then needed to shut down particular services because they could no longer pay for them, and then people were in those government departments, the parks and all those sorts of areas, they were put off on unpaid leave.
So that's the issue as it stands at the moment. So we hear about furlough, and that means that employees are stood down to basically say, well, look, you're on holidays, but you're not going to get paid for them. Is that about right? Yeah,
exactly. So that was the first part of it, and that then flowed into the second issue, which was the debt ceiling. So the US government sets its debt limits on a regular basis, and whilst it's in deficit, while they're continuing to spend more than they earn, they have to continually raise that debt ceiling. And then that came into play at the same time as well. So for them to be able to continue to spend, they needed to increase the debt ceiling, and so they needed to get that agreed upon as well. And so it wasn't until the 16th, 17th of this month that they eventually said enough is enough, and they agreed to continue spending. They agreed to increase the debt limit, and Obama got what he wanted. The Affordable Care Act has been put into play. They've been able to meet their obligations in terms of their repaying the interest on their debt. They've been able to continue to pay for government services. Employees have been able to come back and continue to work in their roles again. The problem for the Republican Party is that it's really not enabled them to achieve what they wanted to achieve. It's reduced the confidence in the US, general confidence in the economy, and so overall the actions, I guess, of the far right, cause more problems than it achieved, blocking these bills.
Okay, well, let's look at how that has affected us here in Australia. I mean, the main issue is it hasn't really made an everyday, day-to-day effect, but obviously with USA being one of the big power economies in the world, it will still have a flow-on effect for other areas in the world, won't it?
Yeah, the term kicking the can down the road has been referred to so often. I think Joe Hockey, when he was over in the US, referred to what they've done or what they've achieved as just kicking the can down the road, meaning that they've just deferred the decision until later. Because what they actually have done, and it's a little bit unique this time around to other times, is that normally they increase the debt levels and they say, okay, it's now $16.7 trillion and let's increase it to $17.1 trillion. But they didn't do it this time. They just said, you can spend what you like until the 7th of February, I think it is. Actually, it might be a 15th of January. Basically, they've got this window of opportunity where they can spend what they like. And people have likened it to, kids in the candy store or a lolly shop saying it's not giving them $10 and here you go, you can spend $10 on what you like. They're saying you can eat what you like in this lolly shop for the next 3 hours. And so obviously the kid's going to just gorge themselves on lollies, as is the US is going to potentially spend as much as it possibly can in this window of opportunity where they don't have a limit on the amount of spending they can incur.
Here in Australia, that's not likely to happen, is it? If either sides of Australian Parliament decide that they're not going to agree on passing certain things, like, for example, the appropriations bill, the budget each year, that doesn't mean that the entire government system is going to shut down like it did in the US, does it?
No, very different systems here to the US. Joe Hockey has recently announced that they're going to increase the Australian government debt ceiling to $500 billion. I guess there's speculation as to why that, but it's a very different system here in Australia to the US. Doesn't necessarily mean that was all going to be spent, but I guess it's going to give the leeway for the government to increase spending or to not have to worry about raising the debt ceiling for the Australian government at a time where it politically might be a little bit more difficult.
So the best thing we can take out of this is maybe a lesson on how not to do things?
Yeah, exactly. So the Obama is wanting to stop this happening ever again in the future, but it is just a part of the US system. If you look at the time between 1976 and 1996, there were 17 government shutdowns ranging from 1 day to 21 days. And so it's a normal part of the US system. It is going to happen into the future unless they make a significant change, but it will most likely happen again in the future. And that's what we can take from it, really, is that it is a normal part of the system. There always is the risk that if they don't come to an agreement that there could be a default, and then that could cause massive ramifications around the world. But in the past it has not occurred, and it's in the best interest of the US to not default, so it's unlikely to ever get to that point in time, but it could. That's the problem with it.
Breaking it down, helping us understand it, our finance expert Gavin Martin on 2020 Today. And Gavin, of course, the principal of Cornerstone Wealth. And it's always great to catch up with him on the Wednesday. Gavin, thanks so much for your time, and thanks for helping break it down a little so we can get a little bit of a clearer understanding on how this whole thing is at work.
Great to be with you, Matt.